Hello, hello, hello. I love that introduction, Rhonda.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I hope our
What's going
watchers do
on?
too. It was a nice little peaceful way to start our overcoming overthinking topic.
Yes.
Yeah, who doesn't overthink from time to time? Oh my God. Uh
Hmm.
and I saw something this morning that piqued my interest because it was a post someone made about basically they were saying that they were inferior and they needed God's help to feel better about themselves.
Hmm.
And it kind of disturbed me because I'll get a little esoteric here in a way, but
Sure.
if if you are made in God's image, why would you be less than?
Right.
So that prompted me to the overthinking topic.
Yeah.
Sparked my thinking on the overthinking topic, and we're not professionals here, but we have a lot of life experience. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I learned is there is something called false modesty.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And modesty really is being humble,
Yeah.
not being humiliated or
Yeah.
humiliating yourself by thinking that you're less than someone or something else. We're all created in the image of our creator. We're part of our creator. There's nothing ugly about that. There is nothing negative about that. There is nothing less than about that because we were created from pure love.
Yeah.
That's what I've come to believe. And if you don't resonate with that, that's okay. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that you're kind of getting close to with what you're saying and where my um I don't know, where my vibe is kind of moving towards as I'm listening to you is, noticing the difference between, the thinking that happens in your head and sort of the response that happens in your heart area. And I think definitely when you're in that overthinking place, usually the feelings in your heart, if you're in that overthinking mode, is, confusion, lack of clarity, probably also feeling less than, and you're struggling to find word, not you, but a person is struggling to find the words to really kind of say, like, actually, I don't feel right about this moment, or I don't
Oh,
feel like I fit into this moment. And I think some of that is, it's sort of like your body and your heart is signaling to you, like, yeah, I don't know what's going upstairs, but like what we're saying here is this isn't a fit. And that's it, like
mhm.
this is whatever that is, it's not a fit. You're not in the right space, and it's definitely not the place from which to make a decision, even if
Mhm.
that decision has to be a rational one or should be a rational one in your mind. You can't make a rational decision if you're in overthinking mode and not sort of like hearing what your heart is saying.
Yeah. And who told you you were less than?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
planted that crap into your head?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll go back to my early recovery days, and when I went to rehab, I I mean, I'm speaking from a reference point here about, with this feeling less than thing.
Mm,
And it was kind of funny because the group of us that were there, and this was a very uncomfortable situation, and you had to trust that what they were teaching you was, you know, going to help you. And we all had, so the counselor got to know us enough, each as individuals, enough that every day that we showed up for our group session, as each person walked in, we had to introduce ourselves. And
okay.
I was informed that I had to introduce myself and I had to state, I am a valuable and worthwhile person because God doesn't make junk.
Mm,
And I wasn't allowed, that was the only way I was allowed to introduce myself. And sooner or
that
later,
must have
it
been
did sink
tough.
in that that person really had my number, I'm going to tell you. And, in my generation, we were taught to be seen and not heard.
Hmm.
Um, and there were a lot of moments of being unacknowledged because the adults were there and you weren't to interrupt or whatever.
Yep.
But I mean, there's like been infinitum studies about that, and it's interesting how children, when they get these messages, how children start to create this little voice inside their own heads,
Yeah.
and and I don't know, but it's
It's.
affected a lot, and a lot of people over analyzing, trying to figure out what other people are thinking, creates
Mhm.
anxiety, worry, fear. And I found this article from the Cleveland Clinic, How to Stop Overthinking, Tips and Coping Strategies.
Mhm.
So I will copy, hopefully, I can copy this website and put it in the chat for
Cool.
those of you who want to use this as a possible resource. Here, let me, I didn't turn on the chat here. Here we go. So, yeah. So, um,
I'm so glad that you brought up that story about your early recovery days, and it reminds me of I was reminds me of about a year after my divorce papers went through and everything, and I finally went back to therapy sessions and got the help of a therapist because I was feeling really low on myself. And we did this exercise where I had to talk to myself and say complimentary things to myself in front of a mirror. I had to look at myself. And for the longest time, I couldn't come up with anything. I couldn't come up with anything nice to say to myself looking in the mirror. And
yeah,
it was really that was tough, and the therapist told me, a few sessions later, when he finally stopped forcing me to talk to myself in the mirror, he was like, yeah, I noticed that, like, you were very self-deprecating, not having a good thing to say about yourself. Didn't when I would ask you a question about yourself, you criticized and harshed yourself, uh, judged yourself harshly. And he was like, and of course, we can't move forward if that's the way that you think about yourself. And I was definitely stirring in that stew, and it was a really powerful wake up call.
yes, yes, and um, if you haven't been through a divorce, it's hard to understand the pain and suffering that someone's going through. Um, and obviously, some and most many times one party just picks up and moves on with their life, and the other party who's been isolated, ostracized, and so on and so forth, spends years recovering from
Mm,
that mental torture and anguish of the bad marriage in and of itself, feeling responsible for things that you're not responsible for,
mm,
and then um, the social stigma of shame and guilt, um, and literally having your heart ripped out in many, many ways. So I'm a firm believer now that I'm at the other last quarter of my life. I'm a firm believer that all these experiences are just there to make us stronger and build us to be better people.
yeah.
Some people are not meant to be in our lives permanently, and some people are. I, I can, I've lost count of how many people over the years have come in and gone out of my life, but everyone left an impact,
Yes.
and positive or negative, it doesn't matter. But I've tried to learn something from each one of those experiences. So
Yeah.
some of the experiences taught me the kind of person I don't want to be.
Yeah.
So I turned that around and focused on the kind of person I want to be as a result.
Yeah.
So, um, but
And I think just to
yeah.
piggyback on what you're just saying there, and in the context of this overcoming overthinking topic, it's, real, if you're in a place where you're stuck, try to think about yourself and what the lesson is for you, or what the understanding is for you to achieve, and
Mhm.
you can let go of thinking about what another person is going through, and in fact,
Right.
I'm so glad that you brought up the topic of going through a divorce, and sort of like both sides of the divorce. And in my case, I was caught up in thinking about, like, here he is moving on, and putting his life back together, or taking steps forward in his life, and here I am kind of like going around in circles, knocking myself down. And actually, whatever his life situation was, I had no knowledge of it, and I certainly don't know what was going through his head at the time either.
Mhm.
But I spent too much time thinking that he was thinking that things were, rosy, fine, and perfect in his life, and that's just, it's none of my business, really.
Mhm. I hear you. I hear
Yeah.
you. So it is a destructive thought pattern.
Hmm.
It really is.
Hmm.
And it does create anxiety.
Hmm.
So, um, and this article from the Cleveland Clinic talks about where we can. One of the destructive thought patterns is catastrophizing,
Mm.
and that's imagining a worst case scenario and worrying about it. And that may or may not happen, you know. Another is all or nothing thinking. So
Mm.
maybe there's no gray area in between. It either is or it isn't.
Hmm.
And what was noted in this article is in reality, most things in life, if you're being realistic, are somewhere in between.
Mm.
And I always throw caution to the wind when I hear someone alluding to it's black and white, all or nothing, because that's not
Mm,
the way. That's a lie. That's a lie.
yeah.
It's a lie. And overgeneralizing.
Yeah.
This is where overgeneralizing is. Let's say you're having a really bad week or a month or even a bad year.
Mm-hmm.
Then overgeneralizing that, yeah, that's just the way my life is. It's always going to be that way. Everything's going to go wrong.
Right.
Um, so I guess this article states that that could be connected with depression.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so some tips to stop overthinking um, is talk therapy, which is I've done it because I had no one to talk to. I got to a point in life where I had absolutely no one I could talk to, and no one that could be objective or to give me different viewpoints. So I sought professional help, and
Mm-hmm.
boy, did that give me a reality check on life. And I
Yeah.
realized that a lot of BS was fed into my head by various people, and was able to deal with those feelings and work through them and realize that I really was a valuable and worthwhile human being, and so is everybody else.
Else.
And somewhere along the line, we're fed this crock of crap that we're less than, and we operate from a guilt and shame mode of operation.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly believe God didn't create us to be that way and to live
Yeah.
that way. So, um, talking about your worries and concerns and getting, um, it's important to find someone that is knows what they're doing too, not just listen to you.
Yeah.
You're actually seeking when you go to counseling, you're actually seeking a life. What is it? A life coach, if you will. A
Mm.
psychologists, I believe, are life coaches, and if they do their job effectively, they can change lives.
Yeah.
So, and focusing on the what ifs in life, that's a warning sign that you're overthinking. And I'm speaking.
Absolutely.
Oh my God, I can't tell you. I spent years what ifing, what if this, what if that, instead of being in the present, the here and the now, and enjoying and experiencing what's going on in my life. So that what if crap just takes you completely out of light living. Um, and so another suggestion here is challenge your negative thoughts.
Yeah.
You might think people hate you or that you'll never reach whatever goal you've set for yourself. Well, that's like setting yourself up for failure, thinking like that. So, what's wrong? There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I'm going to go for it. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's as you were talking, I was thinking, that the signals that you might be overthinking are that um, you either might be talking to somebody who's egging you on, and where you find that you just keep circling around the same thing, gosh, it's such a rainy day today. It's not, it's a gorgeous day today, actually, but such a rainy day today. Things are so soggy. Yes, I know. My shoes got wet getting me here. And then the next person says, absolutely. I mean, I just don't like the rain. And you're all just kind of like feeding each other when you're having those conversations. That's not talking it out. That's not venting it. That is not what happens when you talk to a coach or a therapist. A well trained coach or a therapist would actually stop you in your tracks and actually make you look at things in a different way.
And
Um,
and learning the skill of distracting yourself. So talking about the weather like that, everybody's moping around about the weather. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I've trained myself to think, "Oh, I'm so glad to see it's raining." And then I start visualizing the flowers and
Yes.
nature, the growth and life that comes out of that rain.
Mm-hmm.
And what a difference. I can feel it physically.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and and it's pretty amazing. It's pretty
It
amazing.
is. And actually, even that process, it's almost like it stops the hamster wheel going on overdrive, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the thoughts calm down, and then you feel this growing intensity in your heart region. And that's alive. That feels alive. Overthinking doesn't feel alive. Overthinking
No,
is
it's
tiresome and
painful.
draining.
It's painful.
Yeah.
Yes, it's painful. It's stressful. It creates anxiety. And
Yeah.
imagine if you said every time you started thinking a negative thought, imagine how you'd feel if you said, "Hey, I'm a valuable and worthwhile human being. God doesn't make junk. I'm not junk. I'm a wonderful, loving, caring human being. And I
Yeah.
need to be around other people who feel that way too
Hmm.
about themselves." Because if we can't feel that way about ourselves, it's pretty hard to give it to other people.
Hmm. Hmm. Not pretty hard. It's impossible.
Yeah, you only have, you get what you give.
Yeah.
And if you're going to give negativity, hate, spite, jealousy, always wanting to argue with people, don't sit back and say, "Well, why is this happening to me?" Take a look at yourself. What are you giving?
We
And
are
you're
joined
going to
by,
run into angelic type of people that can look beyond that and be
yes.
compassionate and know and understand what's really happening here. And if you're around those kind of people, they're going to help you turn that around and be
Yep.
supportive of you.
But
And
only so long,
right,
because they also know that if they stay too close for you for too long, it just brings them down too, and that's not a
right,
natural space
no,
for them to be
no,
in.
we're here to we want to uplift each other, not bring each
Absolutely.
other down.
Yep.
And that's a bad habit. It's an um
Misery
it's
loves company.
hurtful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is an inside job. It really is.
Totally.
And I feel great empathy for those who never find their way out of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Guess what?
life doesn't have to be that way. And I think when it registered the most with me is when I read a story about a Holocaust survivor, and he
Mm,
talked about how he was able to come out of that alive in
yeah.
Auschwitz. And I'm getting chills just talking about this. And that story really, really registered with me.
Hmm.
And it has a lot to do with what we're talking about right now.
It
And
does.
he did that. They weren't going to break him because they couldn't go inside.
They can't go in here.
That's right.
That's right.
And so it loving, caring, and believing in yourself, and knowing that you are a worthy, beautiful, loving person. Nobody can take that away from you.
Absolutely.
But you can't
And
expect the outside world to be giving it to you all the time. At some point, we have to have enough life experiences to realize that other people's behavior has everything to do with them and nothing to do with you, because it's what's going on in their internal world. So be the observer. If you can put yourself in an observer's position, I believe that things will look a lot differently, and you'll realize it's not personal. That that person's behavior is telling me a lot about what's going on with them right now,
For
and
sure.
and
And
you can feel compassion for them.
yeah, and you don't even have to go to those lengths.
No, and
The only job that we have is to feel good, feel good about ourselves, really love ourselves, and then the rest will kind of fall into place.
yes, it
Um,
does. It really
yeah,
does, and I can say that now. I couldn't have told you that 40
for
years
sure.
ago.
For sure.
I wouldn't have been able to say that 35 years ago, 40 years ago, but I can now.
No, because you were in
Um,
a completely different vibrational place.
well, I have all this life experience now, and it gives you
Hmm.
perspective.
Hmm.
It really does. And it starts with, and I'm getting in back to the individual. It starts with that gut feeling that something's wrong here. Something's wrong here. I don't know what it is, but something's wrong here, and I'm going to find out what it is. I think it starts there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank
We
you.
are joined by Cece this morning, and
Yes, we
she
are.
is she is on fire as well. You
She
know,
is.
and actually, she is the perfect example of what you're talking about. Like when you're in a certain vibrational place, first of all, when you're overthinking, you're not in a high vibration place. That's guaranteed. So like to raise your vibration, stop the overthinking, and I think you had found some tips on how to get your overthinking, throw your overthinking overboard, and get into more of a feeling vibrational place.
Yeah. And when to ask for help. And I'll just read what this says. Well,
Okay.
everyone overthinks sometimes. I mean, everybody does. If you've been unable to control how much you worry and it starts interfering with your ability to function, it may be time to seek help from a professional. You may also start experiencing physical symptoms like irritability, fatigue, concentration or memory difficulties, and insomnia. Excessive worrying and stress can also lead to or intensify digestive issues, plus cause tension in your shoulders and neck. I mean, personally, I used to have neck pain and lower back pain all the time.
Yep.
I don't anymore, not at all. But if you find it's difficult to control your worrying, or it's hard to concentrate at work, or it's hard to fall asleep at night, at that point, this doctor recommends seeking professional help. And one thing you will learn in therapy is how to not get caught up in your worrying. When you're in the midst of worrying, you don't always recognize it. With CBT, you'll learn how to recognize that you're spiraling and engaging in unhelpful rumination. You will practice writing down your negative thoughts, then challenging and reframing them. Essentially, you will develop an effective toolkit for coping and overthinking.
Yeah. I used to suffer from sleepless nights, and especially in those, post divorce days. In fact, I would say for several years, I was suffering from sleep deprivation. And it was so bad at one point where I would fall asleep because I was so exhausted because the previous night I didn't get
Yeah.
any sleep. And then I would wake up in the middle of the night already with my brain sort of going on overdrive, and I wouldn't be able to sleep for the rest of the night. So I would really only get like maybe an hour or 2 hours of sleep. And then the rest of the time I would just be lying in bed, like going crazy. And
Hmm.
if you're struggling with sleep, that is the first sign that you need to change something.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that get help. I mean, honestly, sleep. Some people really downplay the importance of sleep, but you are not operating well if you're
No.
only getting,
No.
an
No.
hour of real. If you pass out for an hour once a night, that's not good.
No.
You know.
And make sure, if you go to a counselor, that they're helping you with solutions,
Yes,
not just listening to you. Because I
and
went to
egging you
someone
on.
once and all they did was listen, and I'm asking questions left and right. He just sat there, nothing,
Yeah,
did nothing to help me unload, learn how to cope with what I was feeling. And I finally did find someone, and oh my God, all my questions were answered, and I found out
hmm
what was BS and what wasn't, and learned coping skills and learned how to
yeah,
get beyond and shift and change. And my life changed. And
yeah,
plus, I was in a recovery program too, which in conjunction with that, so everything just worked together.
yeah,
And don't underestimate it when you hear the word, oh, you're so codependent. Well, that's someone telling you you're in trouble, uh,
hmm
because those are toxic behaviors. And,
yeah,
you know, we don't have to go through life suffering mentally and emotionally because
no,
that comes out physically. I had a brother who died of cancer. Very angry man, kept all his, he very, very angry. And it was like rotating stuff in his head. And I'm convinced that his anger, years and years of unreleased anger, contributed to his health change and getting cancer. Now that's
mm,
just my opinion. I'm not a professional, but I'm convinced of that. And I've seen it enough to, question, wow, there's something to this.
right.
Um,
And maybe even we can't. We're not medical professionals, so we can't talk about the cause and effect. But the reality is that somebody who is, when I was not sleeping and overthinking, I was not living. So,
no,
I was walking dead. I mean,
yeah,
obviously it didn't kill me, but I wasn't alive. So
I
that's
remember
not the
walking
life I'm here
around.
to live.
Please, isn't there someone out there who can fix me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I and yeah, the outside world. But you know what? When I asked, I asked God for help. I just used the infamous words, please help me. And I said it from the bottom of my heart. All the right people started appearing in my life,
Yeah.
kind, loving, compassionate people, and also the
Yeah.
opposite.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, two and two started coming together. And then I started looking at things a little bit differently. And instead of internalizing all this junk going on around me, thinking that every bad thing in the world is my fault, I started being an observer
hmm
and observing. And then if someone was really mean, ugly, or nasty to me, I started asking myself, what did I do to cause this person to feel this way towards me? And almost every time my answer was, I did nothing.
Mm.
And boy, did that start putting things in perspective. Oh, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
tis
Yeah.
the top of the hour.
It is. And Cece, thank you so much for joining us and for your input. Um,
hmm
yeah, low vibrational energy floating around aimlessly.
Yep. Lurking
And
around the planet.
yeah, and you learn to recognize it and walk away from it.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's that simple. We appreciate you all. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And
Yes.
we hope our experience and discussions do help you. If you resonate, great. If you don't, that's okay too. We're fine
It's
with
all
it either
good.
way. And with that, you have a wonderful day. And we'll see you next time.
See you next week.